The 525th edition of the Four Corners podcast starts right now.
This is the Four Corners podcast.
And that could make a difference. Lawson at the buzzer. Got it! Maybe not. Ty Lawson wins it at the buzzer.
Deep three. And Green rips down the rebound in traffic. 4-on-1.
What a great job. What a terrific job in transition. I mean, you couldn't plan that any better as a coach.
Gets the roll. Here we go. Page has it. Carolina down one. 84-83. Page into the front court with 4 seconds. Page to the rim. Got it! Got it! 9/10 of a second to go. Inbounds. Washington gets it to Warren. His full court shot. No good. Marcus Page baby. Does it for the Tar Heels. Carolina wins it.
Don't force it if you're Goss.
Comes in. Blocked by Meeks. Buried up ahead to Jackson. And he tucks it down for the 5-point lead. Matthews off the mark. And this year the confetti is going to fall for North Carolina. They're not going to be denied this time. Inside 30 overall. Love, top of the key. Oh! Big time delivery.
Here are your hosts, Josh Marlowe and Anthony Pagnotta.
What's going on, guys? Welcome into another edition of the Four Corners podcast, coming at you as late as we possibly can. I don't know if they'll let us go any later than this. And you may be saying, well, don't you have to get up and go to work in the morning? I do, but we got to talk a little bit of Tar Heel basketball. And unfortunately, having to do it again here by myself tonight, was not the original plan. Thought that Fitty would be with me. Josh Marlowe, my normal co-host, would be with me, but here we are. We are in the sicko hours of the morning, as they like to say, 1:45 a.m. on the East Coast. Just watched the Big Sky final, in case you were tuned into that. And so now we're going to be talking a little bit of college basketball as late as anybody else on this night as we preview Carolina's matchup in the quarterfinals of the ACC tournament against the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. That'll be the first game that Wake Forest will play, the second game that Carolina will play. We'll, of course, take you through a look at Wake Forest. We'll look back at the first matchup between the two sides and also talk to you a little bit about what Carolina brings to the table before we give our keys to the game and pick the game for Carolina. Did not give my game ball away earlier today. I did want to mention that. That I am giving it to Jalen Withers after that unbelievable performance that he had. Vin Allen Lubin, of course, would have been worth it as well. That probably would have been the second game ball that would have been given out if it was a two-man podcast. So congratulations to both of those guys. They performed very, very well in the Tar Heels' first game in Charlotte. Now Carolina pivoting to that second game. And let's start with our pod thought of the day. Play hard, play smart, play together. It's what the Carolina program is built on. Dean Smith, of course, with those words. And Carolina did that in the first game that they played against the Notre Dame Fighting Irish. They came out hungry. You saw it immediately out of the gate with how Carolina started the game. Looked like a motivated team that knows that they have to go to Charlotte and do something in order to make it into the NCAA tournament. Now, as we sit here currently right now, Carolina is in the field according to Joe Lunardi, not according to any of the other bracketologists that I have seen, but according to Lunardi, he has that team in after today's action. Now, Carolina still having to wait on, Boise State to get their conference tournament going in the Mountain West. You're hoping that they end up losing that conference tournament game. Oklahoma was a game that Carolina was hoping they would get. But the reason why Carolina is where they're at is because they went out and won today, won in impressive fashion. And Ohio State is now a team that looks like they are on the outside looking in to the tournament field after they got beat by Iowa earlier today. That's a brutal loss for them. Carolina now in a prime position to potentially capitalize. And who knows, if they end up winning this game against Wake Forest, that might be enough to get Carolina into the field, just sneak in there. Still would probably like to get that extra quad one win if it is against Duke. If Duke gets upset, waiting till the final to potentially face either Clemson or Louisville, which at that point, if Carolina wins, it doesn't matter. They don't need that extra quad one win. It would, help in terms of seeding, but Carolina would, of course, take home the automatic qualifier. But in order to do that, they have to get past the Wake Forest Demon Deacons. The Demon Deacons, a team that comes in 21-10 on the season, 13-7 in the ACC, same record as Carolina, but they do have the tiebreaker over Carolina. That's the reason that they are the 4 seed, because they beat Carolina earlier this season, 67-66 in Winston-Salem. Carolina in that matchup, certainly a game that they wish they had back, another one of those close losses, which we'll dissect here in a minute. The Demon Deacons 2-1 in neutral site games so far this year, including a big win over Michigan that they are using to carry their resume and keep them alive in the hopes of getting an at-large tournament bid for themselves. The one loss in a neutral site, a legitimate one for the Demon Deacons earlier this season to Florida, very similar opponent or a common opponent there for them and Carolina. Their other neutral site win, a closer win over Minnesota than they probably would have liked. Meanwhile, away from home, this is a team that was deemed as road warriors earlier in the season, but they are just 8-7 away from home. They've lost their last 2 away from home, which includes a loss on the road at NC State. And so Carolina is hoping that they will be able to take advantage of a team that has struggled a little bit outside of Winston-Salem here in the final couple of months of the season. Wake Forest, 2 players that currently average double-figure scoring. That would be Hunter Salas, the first-team All-ACC starting point guard for the team. He has 18 points per game so far this season, 5.1 rebounds per game, 2.8 assists per game, shooting 46% from the field, 28% from 3. Cam Hildreth, 14.9 points per game, 3.8 rebounds per game, 2.7 assists per game, shoots 44% from the field and 33% from 3. And so you've got 2 guys that are scoring in double figures. Kind of shows you just what the Demon Deacons are, a team that doesn't score the ball a lot, but is really good defensively. They are averaging 70.5 points per game so far this year, which is 272nd in the country. Meanwhile, they are allowing just 68 points per game so far this year, which is 63rd in the country. And while there are, just 2 guys that are in double figure scoring, you do have Trayvon Spillers, who averages 9.9 a game, 7.5 rebounds, and Efton Reed, who averages 9 points per game and 6.5 rebounds. So size certainly going to be something that will be on display in this game. You look at Carolina coming into this matchup, and they come in 21-12 after the win over Notre Dame earlier today, 13-7 in the ACC. They have won 7 of their last 8 games, and during the recent winning streak, Carolina was averaging 90.8 points per game during that 6-game winning streak. They continued to score the ball very well against Notre Dame, even though they only had 76 points, a very efficient day from Carolina from the field. Carolina so far this year, 3-3 in neutral site games after yesterday, and 1-1 in Charlotte. Of course, the win coming against Notre Dame and the loss coming to Florida in the Jumpman Invitational earlier this year. The neutral site wins for Carolina this year: Dayton, UCLA, and Notre Dame. And the losses in neutral site games, you have Auburn, Michigan State, and Florida. So those have been some of the top teams in the country, which, look, not taking Wake Forest lightly, but certainly not one of the better teams in the country, not a team that's competing for a national championship like those teams are. Carolina has 3 players currently averaging double-figure scoring. Now, these are stats that were not updated, at least as of yet, on Sports Reference. So RJ Davis, 17.3 points per game, 3.6 rebounds per game, 3.8 assists, shooting 41% from the field and 33% from 3. Ian Jackson averaging 13.3 points per game, 2.9 rebounds, 0.9 assists, shooting 48% from the field and 41% from 3. And Seth Trimble, 11.9 points per game, 5.2 rebounds per game, 1.4 assists per game, shooting 44% from the field and 30% from 3. Those numbers will go down for both Ian Jackson and Seth Trimble. RJ Davis could see the scoring number go down just a little bit, but the rebounding number should stay consistent, and the assist number could possibly go up for him, as could some of the efficiency stats for him as well. When you go back and look at the first meeting between these two sides, you know, this was a pretty ugly game. This was played at the pace, as we talked about with so many games early on in the season, the pace that Wake Forest wanted to play with. Cam Hildreth led the way with 20 points, but the thing is that 4 of the 5 starters for Wake Forest score in double figures in this game. A pretty efficient night overall, even though they were just 2 of 15 from beyond the arc. They did enough getting to the foul line 27 times to Carolina's 10 times. That was a big difference in the game, as was the rebounding, where the Demon Deacons held a 41-33 edge on the glass, 10 offensive rebounds, including 5 from Trayvon Spillers. Carolina with just 8 offensive rebounds in that game. So definitely a game that was controlled on the glass by Wake Forest, a team that at the time was much bigger than Carolina. Carolina was rolling with the starting 5 of Jalen Washington, Drake Powell, Ian Jackson, RJ Davis, and Elliot Cadeau. For RJ Davis, one of his more successful games, 21 points in that game. On 8 of 16 shooting, was 3 of 9 from beyond the arc. Elliot Cadeau, very successful game for him as well. 14 points in that one, had 13 assists to just 3 turnovers. But as we mentioned, it was really the free throw shooting and the rebounding that was a huge difference for Carolina in this game. So that's something that Carolina will have to be focused on this time around. And the thing is that the rebounding, you feel really confident that Carolina can compete a little bit better there. They have been rebounding much better here recently. Wake Forest, still a really solid overall rebounding team, but Carolina is now going to be the team that's actually going to come in with a little bit of a size advantage in this game. Now, not with the guards, of course. Hunter Salas at 6'5", is going to be, a tough guard for either Elliot Cadeau or RJ Davis because of the size that he brings to that position. Cam Hildreth at 6'4", is also going to tower over either RJ Davis or Elliot Cadeau. But the thing that's different this time around is that Carolina is going to have Jalen Withers on the floor at the 4 spot. He'll be matching up against Trayvon Spillers, you would imagine. And if he does, that gives Carolina a little bit of a height advantage there. And then you'll have Drake Powell, of course, on the perimeter as well, providing some nice length as well as some really good perimeter defense. So this should be a game that looks a little bit different than the first time that these two met, when Carolina was still trying to figure out the roles for a guy like Jalen Withers and Drake Powell. Also, Vin Allen Lubin in that first game really didn't play as much as you would have liked with Jalen Washington started the game. Vin Allen Lubin in that one played 20 minutes, had just 6 points, did have 7 rebounds, one of his better rebounding games until this recent stretch here, but did only have 1 offensive rebound. You would like to see him play a little bit more in this game since he is going to be the starter, and hopefully can get to that offensive glass the way that he wasn't able to in the first matchup between these two sides. This hopefully is going to be a game that looks a little bit different. And here's the thing, when it comes to the discussion topic, I think this one's pretty simple because Carolina, I mean, it's natural for us as fans to look ahead and see what could possibly be on the horizon. Now, we got to see what's going to happen in that first game. Carolina will know the result of that first game when they end up taking the court. So they'll know if they win whether or not they will be taking on Duke or Georgia Tech. So the question is, are you worried about the Tar Heels looking ahead to Duke or being distracted by the bubble talk? And here's the thing, I'm not really that concerned about it. They were asked, a few of the guys were asked about being on the bubble earlier today. A lot of them said that they're basically just controlling what they can control. The belief from a lot of these guys, as you would expect, is that this is a tournament team. So, I mean, look, if they believe that they are a tournament team, I don't think that's going to be a distraction on their mind. I do think that, you're hoping that the fact that Duke could be on the horizon is not something that they're looking forward to. But my belief is that that's not going to happen. This is a team that beat you earlier in the season. It's one of those games that you look back on and you say in your mind that you felt like this was a really good opportunity. It would have been a quad one opportunity, top 75. I know Wake has not had the greatest season. They've had some tough losses here towards the end, but they're still a top 75 team. And this could have been that another one of those games that was a quad one victory if you had ended up closing this game a little bit stronger down the stretch. That was really the difference the first time around, was that Carolina was not able to make the plays late that they needed to. Their offense became stagnant like we saw during the losing streak. And, in the end, it was ultimately the undoing of Carolina and allowed Wake Forest to pick up a win that at the time we thought was part of their resume that might be enough to get them into the NCAA tournament. Now, Wake is still fighting, and I think that's also going to fuel Carolina as well, that the team on the other side is still fighting. They believe that they have a chance to make the NCAA tournament as well. If Carolina loses this game, do I think there is zero chance that they end up making it into the NCAA tournament field? I would say no. I don't think there's zero chance, but I would think that that would give Wake Forest the advantage and put them in a prime position to potentially get to the NCAA tournament. Carolina is going to know that coming in, and so hopefully they bring the right mindset into this game. So let's get into the keys to the game for Carolina. Do want to thank everybody that is watching with us here. I know these are as late a podcast as it gets. And as my guy Shroppy said, sicko hours right here. Yeah, you know it. We're pushing through right here. Donnie Milton, we appreciate you for being in here and watching this edition of the podcast here this late at night. For those that listen in the morning, really appreciate you guys waking up with us on your drive in to work or wherever you're going early in the morning. So when you get into the keys to the game, I think it's very similar to the keys that you had in the first game of the ACC tournament, because I think it's the keys to Carolina's success right now. You want to continue the hot shooting, because from the outside, that's really been the difference for Carolina, has been how well they have shot the ball from the outside. I think just in general, you want to be able to shoot the ball well. I think you'd like to get back into the 50s in percentage wise, get to the point where you're making over half your baskets in this game, especially against a team that is as good as Wake Forest is. But I do think that because of how good Wake Forest is defensively, if you have to put together the type of performance that you put up against Notre Dame, then I think you're probably going to be pretty satisfied. The key, though, is you've got to be able to make those shots from the outside. The first matchup, you weren't able to make nearly as many shots. You were just 8 of 32 from beyond the arc. You didn't have that guy that could consistently stretch the floor at that 4 spot. You're hoping that the hot shooting from Jalen Withers carries over in this game. You're hoping that R.J. Davis can shoot the ball well from beyond the arc again. But here's the thing is that while those guys have been shooting the ball well from the outside, Drake Powell, I think, also has really been shooting the ball well here as we've come down the home stretch of the season from out there. You do need Ian Jackson, and you do need Seth Trimble to return to being guys that can make those shots from the outside. They were a combined 0 of 4 in the game against Notre Dame, and Trimble really struggling these last 2 games. That's something that hopefully he's going to be able to shake off because Carolina desperately needs him to be able to score the ball. It's going to come up at some point here. And the good news is that he's had stretches like this before this season and has been able to snap himself out of it. But he's one of his last 13 from the field. Ian Jackson in the game against Notre Dame, just 2 of 6 from the field, and was pretty quiet against Duke as well. So you need those guys, at least one of those guys, I think, to step up in this game against a Notre Dame team, a Wake Forest team that's going to be much better defensively than Notre Dame was against you. One of the better defensive teams in this conference. I mean, you could argue the second best defensive team in this conference behind Duke. Maybe you want to argue Virginia, but we've seen both teams so far this year, and I think Wake Forest certainly gave Carolina more issues than Virginia did. So that's where you need your guys to be able to knock those shots down from the outside. The second key to the game is control the glass, because the first matchup you didn't. You lost the battle on the glass 41-33, and that was a big difference in the game. Really, I think the biggest key here is defensive rebounding. You want to create those second chance opportunities. There's no doubt about that, and Carolina has done a really good job of that. That's what Vin Allen Lubin specializes in. The worry is, what are you going to do on the defensive glass? Are you going to be able to take away those opportunities that Trayvon Spiller had in the first game that we saw Efton Reed be able to pull down in that first game? Those were the 2 guys that really hurt Carolina on the offensive glass. This is a game where now that you've got a little bit more size, you look at what Jalen Withers did defensively rebounding the basketball in the game against Notre Dame, and he had 9 defensive rebounds. All of his rebounds were defensive rebounds. You need another type of performance like that from him. If Vin Allen Lubin could give you 5 defensive rebounds like he did today, maybe if he could get into that 6-7 range, you'd be feeling pretty confident. But it's going to be a team effort, because this is a Wake Forest team that has bigger guards that can rebound as well. So Carolina's got to be ready to crash the glass, come away with those rebounds, and you got to be able to do the same thing on the offensive end of the floor. Create those extra opportunities, get those second chance points, because that's what's going to allow Carolina to be successful. That's also going to open up some of those shots from the outside when you're able to rip down those offensive boards, kick it back out. That can lead eventually, with some of the passing that we saw from Carolina in the game earlier today or yesterday against Notre Dame, that leads to some easy opportunities. And that's ultimately what you want to do if you're Carolina. And then, the third key to the game is really just be able to match what Wake Forest is doing defensively. The first time around, Carolina did a pretty good job of that. Mainly take away the 3-point line, make them beat you inside the arc, because the way that you're shooting the 3 ball right now, that's going to play into your advantage. And this is a team that, when they have won games this season against, some of the better opponents, it's been when they've been able to knock down shots from the outside. The good news is it's still not consistent for them. They're still one of the worst 3-point shooting teams in the entire country, 357th right now, shooting just 29% as a team from 3. That's the area that you want to make sure you're taking away, though, in this game, and not allowing them to be that successful in, because that's what can, really get this Wake Forest offense moving. I mean, as a whole, just an all right shooting team at 44.7%. The 2-point field goal shooting is middle of the road. So that's the thing. Make sure you take away that 3-point line. And if you can run them off of that and, take care of yourself on the inside, not get beat the way that you did in that first matchup in the paint, then I think that Carolina's got a legitimate chance to be able to win that game. I know this is a shorter edition of the podcast, guys. And again, I'm by myself, so we are going to leave it a little bit shorter here. So let's get to my prediction for the game. What do I think is going to happen? Man, Carolina is going to be in for a battle in this one. This one could be a rock fight with a Wake Forest team that is looking to continue their NCAA tournament quest, just like Carolina is. This is a team that has the recipe to beat Carolina based off of the first game, but that was to beat the 3-guard lineup. Carolina now is running with 3 forwards. The 2-guard lineup has been much more successful. Carolina has been much more efficient offensively. And so I truly believe that matchup, that different matchup for Wake Forest could give them some issues. Primarily a guy in Trayvon Spillers, who in the first game performed really, really well, but now we'll have a little bit more size on him. I like the way that Jalen Withers was defensive rebounding. I think Carolina has become a much better rebounding team here in the last few weeks, and so I expect that to carry over into this game. I like the way that both Withers and Lubin are playing offensively. I think both guys will continue to perform well. I do think another big day for RJ Davis. And I do think that one of the two, Ian Jackson or Seth Trimble, will step up. I think Carolina, the key to this game is, can you get to about 75 points? If you get to where you were in the game yesterday against Notre Dame, I feel pretty confident that Carolina will be able to win it, because I just don't know if Wake Forest has that type of offensive firepower to keep up. I'd love to get this game in to the 80s for Carolina. I think if Carolina gets there is no way that Wake Forest comes out with the win. I don't know if Carolina quite gets to that 80 number, but I do think that Carolina wins. Give me Carolina somewhere in the 4 to 6 point range. I do think it'll be a little bit of a nail biter down the stretch, but I think Carolina finds a way to pull it out. So that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Again, guys, it is incredibly late. So if you were expecting a little bit of a longer edition of the podcast, hopefully that will be tomorrow, where we will get that out to you, me and Josh. If Carolina advances, we will be doing the preview podcast. It'll be, in the middle of the morning for you guys, as opposed to incredibly late at night, because Carolina will be playing a little bit, will be playing in the evening if they advance on to face the Duke Blue Devils. But I hope you guys enjoyed this edition of the podcast, even though it was a little bit shorter. Make sure you get over to the website, HeelToughBlog.com. In-depth recap of the Notre Dame game for you guys. Josh gives you his takeaways from what he saw out there. So you didn't get to hear his opinions here on the podcast, so make sure that you go and read about them. He'll have the preview of Wake Forest for you in the morning, a little more information on the Demon Deacons that you may need. So make sure you check that out. And then meanwhile, on the football side of things, news still rolling in during this time. Carolina officially, according to a report from On3 Sports, making a decision about whether or not they will have a spring game this year. Find out if they will have a spring game this year. And if they're not, what they are going to do in place of it, so that the fans can get out and check out this Tar Heel team before we go into the summer. So plenty of great stuff on the website for you guys to check out. Other recruiting news on the football side of things, any news that will be rolling in, any new targets for Carolina in the transfer portal for basketball or for football. All of that stuff will be on the website, HeelToughBlog.com. Make sure you check it each and every day. We suggest checking it multiple times a day, or If you want to just have all of that stuff sent directly to you, there's one easy way to do it. Go over to the Heel Tough Blog Twitter page, follow the page, and then when you follow it, turn on the notifications so that anytime that we post an article, an edition of the podcast, we go live, all of that stuff will be coming directly to you. You'll get the notification to let you know that we've posted on the account so that you can immediately go there and see what is going on and the latest around Tar Heel football and basketball. So once again, that's going to wrap it up for this edition of the podcast. Want to thank all of those who joined me tonight on this edition. Want to thank you guys who will be listening to the podcast. And as always, go Tar Heels.